The text message arrived at 4:17 p.m. on a Thursday while I was reviewing quarterly projections. "We need to talk when I get home. This isn't working anymore." 17 years of marriage reduced to a text sent between meetings, as if our life together was just another item on Robert's executive to-do list that needed to be crossed off efficiently. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Kane, and for 17 years, I'd believed I was married to a dedicated aerospace engineer who traveled frequently for government contracts. Robert worked for Lockheed Martin on classified projects that required extended trips to secure facilities, sometimes for weeks at a time. His work was important, demanding, and explained every absence, every late night, every weekend when duty called. What I didn't know until Friday morning was that Robert's government contracts included maintaining a second family in Colorado Springs, complete with a wife who thought she was his only wife, and 2 children who'd never heard of Dr. Elizabeth Kane or the life Robert had built in Virginia. Robert thought he could terminate our marriage like a failed defense contract while protecting his compartmentalized double life from discovery. What he was about to learn was that some secrets can't be classified when you abandon them to someone who specializes in forensic pathology and understands exactly how to conduct thorough investigations. Picture this: a colonial mansion in McLean, Virginia, where I'd spend my mornings reviewing autopsy reports and toxicology findings before heading to my position as chief medical examiner for Fairfax County. Robert would kiss me goodbye each morning before driving to his office at Lockheed Martin, where he managed sensitive aerospace projects that supported national defense initiatives. My work involved determining causes of death in complex cases where evidence was limited, motives were unclear, and families needed answers about how their loved ones had died. I specialized in detecting patterns that others missed, analyzing evidence that seemed unrelated, and reconstructing timelines that revealed truth hidden beneath layers of deception. Skills that would prove remarkably applicable to my personal life. Robert and I had what everyone considered the perfect government contractor marriage: successful medical examiner and dedicated defense engineer, both serving public interests while maintaining security clearances that required discretion about our professional responsibilities. "The project in Colorado is extending another 2 weeks," Robert would explain during his regular check-in calls. "You know how these government contracts work. When national security is involved, timelines become flexible. I miss you, but this could lead to long-term opportunities for both of us." Long-term opportunities. He wasn't lying about that. Robert's security clearance meant I couldn't ask detailed questions about his projects, locations, or colleagues. Operational security required compartmentalized information, limited communication during sensitive phases, and trust that his absences served purposes more important than personal convenience. I understood classification requirements because my own work involved sensitive cases that required discretion. When Robert couldn't discuss project details or explain schedule changes, I respected the constraints of his clearance level and trusted that his dedication to national defense justified the personal sacrifices our marriage required. Voice becoming suspicious. But forensic pathology teaches you to notice patterns that don't align with stated explanations. When someone's behavior consistently contradicts their claimed motivations, you start applying investigative frameworks to understand what evidence might be hidden beneath surface narratives. Small details that hadn't seemed significant individually began forming patterns when analyzed collectively. Robert's Colorado Springs facility required extended stays but never appeared in any public contract announcements. His security protocols prevented family contact during projects, but allowed him to maintain regular social media activity. Using the same methodical approach I applied to complex death investigations, I began documenting Robert's travel patterns, communication schedules, and behavioral changes over time. What emerged wasn't evidence of classified government work, it was evidence of systematic deception that had been carefully maintained for years. Robert thought his security clearance provided perfect cover for a double life that national defense priorities would protect from scrutiny. What he'd forgotten was that he'd married someone whose job was uncovering truth in situations where other people had tried very hard to hide it. Thursday's breakup text had been efficient, professional, and completely inadequate for someone who'd spent decades learning how to analyze incomplete information and reconstruct hidden narratives. Robert was about to discover exactly how thorough a forensic investigation could be when conducted by someone who specialized in finding answers that other people preferred to keep buried. Friday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that comes from shock transforming into professional curiosity. If Robert thought he could end 17 years of marriage with a text message while maintaining operational security about his reasons, he'd underestimated someone who made a living extracting truth from situations where evidence had been deliberately concealed. I approached Robert's double life like any complex forensic case, by gathering all available evidence, analyzing patterns that might reveal hidden information, and reconstructing timelines that would expose what actually happened versus what I'd been told was happening. Starting with financial records, I traced every business expense, travel reimbursement, and credit card charge that Robert had categorized as work-related over the past 5 years. Government contractors maintain meticulous documentation for security and auditing purposes, which meant Robert's deception had created a comprehensive paper trail. What I discovered wasn't evidence of classified government projects. It was evidence of a man maintaining 2 complete households while using his security clearance as cover for systematic fraud against both his employer and his family. Robert's Colorado Springs facility was actually a residential address in a suburb where Lockheed Martin had no secure installations. His extended project timelines corresponded with school holidays and family events that had nothing to do with defense contracts. His communication restrictions coincided with periods when someone maintaining a double life would need to avoid conflicting schedule demands. Using professional databases I had access to through my medical examiner position, I conducted background research on the Colorado Springs address where Robert had been spending weeks at a time. Public records, utility accounts, and property ownership information painted a clear picture of domestic life that had nothing to do with aerospace engineering. The property was owned by Robert Kane and Sarah Mitchell Kane, purchased 3 years ago with a mortgage that listed Robert's Lockheed Martin employment as primary income verification. School district records showed 2 children enrolled under the Kane surname, with Robert listed as their father and emergency contact. Cross-referencing social media profiles and public records, I identified Sarah Mitchell Kane as an elementary school teacher who'd been posting family photos featuring Robert at birthday parties, school events, and holiday celebrations that had occurred during his supposed government projects. Robert hadn't just been having an affair while lying about his work schedule. He'd been maintaining a complete second family, using his security clearance to justify absences while building a life in Colorado that mirrored everything he'd claimed to value about our marriage in Virginia. But the most damning evidence came from analyzing Robert's employment records, which I could access through government databases used for background investigations in sensitive death cases. Robert's actual project assignments showed no extended deployments to Colorado Springs, no classified work requiring weeks-long facility isolation, and no security protocols that would prevent family communication. Every explanation Robert had given me about his absences was fabricated. Every government project he'd described was fictional. Every security restriction he'd claimed was a lie designed to protect a double life that included children who called him daddy and a wife who thought she was his only wife. Robert thought his security clearance provided perfect operational cover for maintaining parallel families in different states. What he was about to learn was that some investigations couldn't be classified. especially when conducted by someone who specialized in determining exactly what had really happened in situations where people had tried very hard to hide the truth. I wasn't going to confront Robert with financial records and background checks. I was going to conduct a field investigation that would demonstrate exactly what happened when you tried to maintain classified lies against someone who understood forensic evidence better than you understood operational security. Saturday morning found me boarding a flight to Colorado Springs, armed with the kind of comprehensive intelligence package I'd compile for a complex death investigation. Robert thought he'd terminated our marriage cleanly while protecting his operational security. What he was about to discover was that some evidence couldn't be contained when the investigator had unrestricted access to the crime scene. I'd taken a week of personal leave from the medical examiner's office, officially to process the unexpected end of my marriage. What I was actually doing was conducting the most thorough field investigation of my career, one that would expose 17 years of systematic deception while documenting evidence that would ensure Robert faced comprehensive consequences for his fraud. The address I'd identified led to a ranch-style house in a family-oriented subdivision where children's bicycles decorated driveways and soccer goals marked backyards. Exactly the kind of neighborhood where a government contractor might settle his family while working at nearby defense facilities. I parked across the street with the kind of patience I'd developed during lengthy crime scene investigations, documenting everything with photographs and detailed notes that would support whatever legal proceedings might follow. This wasn't surveillance. This was evidence collection in a case where multiple parties had been defrauded by the same perpetrator. Within 2 hours, I'd observed a domestic scene that confirmed everything my background investigation had revealed. Robert emerged from the house with 2 children, a boy approximately 10 years old and a girl who appeared to be 7, engaging in the kind of casual family interactions that suggested established routines rather than recent developments. The woman who joined them matched photographs I'd found of Sarah Mitchell Kane. But seeing her interact with Robert revealed the depth of deception that financial records couldn't capture. These weren't affair partners conducting a secret relationship. These were spouses managing household responsibilities and parenting duties with the comfort of people who'd been building a life together for years. That's when I made a decision that would change multiple lives forever. Instead of continuing passive observation, I was going to introduce myself to Sarah Mitchell Kane and provide her with information that would help her understand exactly who she'd been married to. Sarah answered the door with the friendly curiosity of someone who lived in a neighborhood where unexpected visitors usually brought welcome news. Her expression shifted to confusion when she saw a well-dressed woman carrying official-looking documents who clearly wasn't selling magazine subscriptions or seeking charitable donations. "Can I help you? Mrs. Mitchell Kane? My name is Dr. Elizabeth Kane. I'm a forensic pathologist from Virginia, and I need to discuss some information about your husband Robert that I think you'll find very important." The silence that followed was profound. Sarah's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally a kind of sick understanding that comes when pieces of an incomplete puzzle suddenly form a picture you'd never wanted to see. "Kane. Your name is Kane." "Yes. Robert's been married to me for 17 years. Until Thursday, I thought I was his only wife." What happened next was something I'd never experienced in any death investigation. Watching someone learn that their entire life had been built on lies, while simultaneously discovering that they weren't alone in their victimization. "Sarah, I think we need to sit down and compare what Robert has told each of us about his work, his travel, and his life. Because I suspect we're going to find that we've both been systematically deceived by someone who's been living a double life for much longer than either of us realized." What followed was the most devastating interview I'd ever conducted. Not because someone had died, but because 2 marriages had been murdered by the same systematic deception. Sarah and I spent the next 4 hours comparing stories that revealed the scope of Robert's fraud with the kind of detail that would have impressed any forensic investigator. Sarah's timeline began 7 years ago when she'd met Robert at a conference for defense contractors in Denver. He'd been charming, successful, and upfront about his demanding job that required frequent travel for classified government projects. Their courtship had been conducted around his security requirements that limited communication during sensitive phases. He always said his work with Lockheed Martin required operational security that made traditional relationships difficult. I thought I was lucky that he'd chosen someone who understood the demands of government service. He told me the same thing: the classified projects, the communication restrictions, the need for operational discretion. I've been respecting security protocols that were actually covering bigamy. Cross-referencing our experiences revealed a pattern of deception so systematic that it demonstrated years of planning rather than opportunistic affair management. Robert had constructed parallel lives that utilized the same cover stories, the same operational explanations, and the same security justifications to maintain separation between his families. But the most damning evidence came from analyzing the children's birth certificates, school records, and medical histories that Sarah shared. Robert's son, Marcus, had been born 6 years ago, followed by daughter Emma 3 years later, both during periods when Robert had been working extended projects that required absence from our Virginia home. Sarah, he wasn't just maintaining 2 marriages. He was building 2 complete families while using his security clearance to justify why neither family could know about the other. This isn't adultery. This is systematic fraud that involved forging government documentation and lying to federal security investigators. The children call him Daddy. Marcus has been asking why Daddy has to travel so much for work. I've been explaining that his job protecting our country requires sacrifices from our whole family. While I've been doing the same thing, telling our friends that Robert's dedication to national defense justifies the personal costs of his demanding schedule. He's been using both our patriotism and professional discretion to enable fraud. As a medical examiner familiar with federal law enforcement procedures, I understood exactly how serious Robert's crimes were. Falsifying security clearance information, using government employment for personal fraud, and maintaining deceptive relationships while holding sensitive positions. All federal offenses that could result in significant prison sentences. Sarah, Robert has committed crimes that go far beyond marriage fraud. He's violated federal security protocols, lied to government investigators, and used his clearance to facilitate systematic deception. This isn't just a personal betrayal. This is a criminal enterprise that affects national security. What amazed me was how quickly Sarah and I moved from mutual shock to strategic cooperation. Both of us had been professionally trained to handle complex situations that required clear thinking under pressure, and both of us understood that Robert's deception required comprehensive response rather than emotional reaction. What do you recommend? How do we handle this legally and practically? We document everything, contact federal authorities about the security violations, and ensure that Robert faces consequences for every aspect of his fraud. He's committed crimes against both families and against the government agency that trusted him with classified access. By Sunday evening, Sarah and I had compiled a case file that would have impressed any federal prosecutor. Financial fraud, security violations, marriage fraud, and systematic deception spanning multiple states, all documented with the kind of thoroughness that comes from having a forensic pathologist and an elementary school teacher working together to expose the truth. Robert thought he could terminate his Virginia marriage while protecting his Colorado family from discovery. What he was about to learn was that some secrets can't be maintained when your victims start comparing notes and applying professional investigative techniques to reconstruct your actual activities. Monday morning brought federal agents to Robert's Lockheed Martin office, armed with evidence that his security clearance had been obtained and maintained through systematic fraud spanning multiple years. The investigation I'd initiated with Sarah's cooperation had attracted the attention of agencies that took security violations very seriously. Special Agent Patricia Wong from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division contacted me directly to discuss Robert's case, which had been flagged as a priority investigation due to the national security implications of his deception. Dr. Kane, your documentation of Mr. Kane's fraudulent activities has revealed security breaches that extend far beyond marriage fraud. Someone maintaining false information while holding classified access represents a significant counterintelligence risk. Agent Wong, I've compiled everything Sarah and I discovered about Robert's systematic deception. The financial records, timeline analysis, and evidence of dual family maintenance should support whatever charges you deem appropriate. What followed was the kind of federal investigation that defense contractors fear most, one that examined every aspect of Robert's professional and personal life to determine how his deceptions might have compromised sensitive information or created vulnerability to foreign intelligence services. Robert's security clearance was immediately suspended, his access to classified information was terminated, and his employment with Lockheed Martin was ended pending the outcome of federal investigation. The man who'd used his clearance to justify systematic fraud was discovering exactly what happened when that clearance became the focus of counterintelligence scrutiny. But the professional consequences were just the beginning. Robert faced federal charges for security fraud, marriage fraud, and conspiracy to defraud government agencies, charges that carried significant prison sentences and would permanently end any possibility of future defense industry employment. Sarah had filed for divorce in Colorado while cooperating with federal investigators who needed to understand the full scope of Robert's deceptive activities. Her attorney was seeking full custody of the children and comprehensive financial support that would protect them from the consequences of their father's criminal behavior. Agent Wong, I want to ensure that Sarah and the children have access to victim services and financial support. They were defrauded just as systematically as I was, and they shouldn't suffer financially because of Robert's crimes. The federal investigation revealed that Robert's fraud extended beyond family deception. He'd been falsifying travel expenses, manipulating project timelines, and using company resources to support his double life, all while maintaining access to sensitive defense information that his personal vulnerabilities should have disqualified him from handling. 6 months later, Robert was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for security fraud, conspiracy, and marriage fraud. His conviction became a case study used in security clearance training about how personal deception could compromise national security and destroy multiple lives simultaneously. 2 years after discovering Robert's double life, I was sitting in Sarah's kitchen in Colorado Springs, helping Marcus with his science homework, while Emma showed me drawings of her new family. That included Dr. Elizabeth as her bonus mom from Virginia. The children had adapted to the truth about their father, with the resilience that kids often demonstrate when adults provide honest, age-appropriate explanations about complex situations. They understood that Daddy had made serious mistakes that hurt multiple families, but that the adults in their lives were committed to protecting and supporting them. Elizabeth, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. The federal investigation, the victim services, the financial support. You could have just walked away after discovering the truth. Sarah, we were both victims of the same fraud. The children deserve stability and support regardless of their father's choices. Besides, building a new kind of family structure seemed more constructive than letting Robert's deception destroy everything he'd touched. Sarah and I had developed what family therapists called a blended support system, where the children maintained relationships with both women who'd been part of their extended family structure. They spent summers in Virginia, learning about forensic science and developing interests that had nothing to do with their father's deception. My career had also evolved in unexpected directions. The federal investigation had led to consulting opportunities with law enforcement agencies that needed forensic expertise for complex fraud cases involving security clearance holders and government contractors. I'd also begun speaking at conferences about forensic approaches to personal investigation, where I shared techniques that civilians could use to verify information when they suspected systematic deception in their relationships. The most unexpected outcome was the relationship that had developed between Sarah and me. What had begun as mutual victimization had evolved into genuine friendship and collaborative parenting that provided the children with more stability than they'd ever had when Robert was maintaining his elaborate deceptions. "You know what's interesting?" Sarah had observed during one of our family dinners. "The children have more honest communication and emotional security now than they ever had when Robert was trying to maintain his double life." Sometimes destruction creates space for something better. Robert had thought he could maintain parallel families by compartmentalizing his deception and using his security clearance as operational cover. What he'd discovered was that some secrets can't be classified when they involve people who refuse to accept incomplete explanations. He'd left me on a Thursday, thinking he could terminate our marriage efficiently while protecting his other family from discovery. By Friday, his other family and I had begun the investigation that would expose 17 years of systematic fraud and build something honest from the wreckage of his lies. Robert had tried to maintain two separate families through security protocols and operational deception. Instead, he'd created one larger family united by shared experience of his betrayal and committed to protecting each other from the consequences of his crimes. Sometimes the best revenge isn't personal. It's building something truthful and supportive from the wreckage of someone else's deception, while ensuring they face appropriate consequences for every life they've damaged. He'd left me on Thursday. I'd met his other family on Friday. By Monday, we'd all learned the truth about who Robert really was. And by the end of the year, we'd built a better family structure than anything Robert had ever provided through his elaborate lies.